evening, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Reasonable Doubt, brought to you by the Harris County Criminal Lawyers Association. I'm your host, Jimmy Ardwan. And we've got a great show tonight. My panel includes Jen Gaut, former probation officer, now turned defense lawyer here in Houston. Scott Pope with the Harris County Public Defender's Office. And of course, as always, my co-host, Julio J.V. Vela.
Hello.
Guys, welcome to the show tonight.
Good to be here.
We got a lot of great topics to cover tonight, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to be taking your calls starting around 8:30. 713-807-1794 is the number. We'll also be taking your questions and comments right here on Twitter at HCCLA_TV. And please go check out our website, www.hcclatv.com. We got all our past episodes and past 60-second law lessons up for you to take a look at. This week, our 60-second law lesson coming up at 8:30 is Mark Thiessen, and he's going to be talking about the need for an independent crime lab right here in Harris County. But right now, I want to jump right in, guys. The big news this week just came out is the hack of Securus. These guys, this has been a long-standing debate amongst the criminal defense bar. And for those who don't know, Securus Technologies, Securus Technologies is one of the largest inmate phone call providers in the country. I think they have about a third of the business, as I understand it. They made over $400 million in revenue last year. They're in over 2,000 facilities, and the news this week was that they had about 70 million of their records hacked. And kind of to explain to everybody what goes on is that these phone calls are recorded. They're then stored on a database, and some people who were, needless to say, not happy with the fact of Securus' business practices and going in there and recording these things, hacked their system, exposed all these phone calls, and included in that were over 14,000 attorney-client phone calls. I mean, guys, this has got to be the largest breach of attorney-client privilege that I can think of. How about y'all?
Well, I agree, and actually they think that it could be more than 14,000
Right.
because they said that it doesn't include if the attorney's cell phone, if the inmate contacted the attorney through their cell phone. So it was just basically the 14,000 were definitely logged to it like a law office. So it is huge, and it's disturbing, especially if you're the attorney on the other side of that breach.
What does it mean to have your attorney-client privilege breached, and how does that affect the case, or how could it?
Well, I mean, aside from the obvious fact that the privilege is there so other people don't hear. I mean, and that's the most basic part of it. And having it breached in any way is troubling. But if you tell your attorney something that you don't want the prosecutor to know, and the chance that they may be able to know that, or that a jailhouse snitch could, I can think of a multitude of ways. Somebody from the sheriff's department might listen to it and tell the state.
I think the biggest thing is that your client should feel that they can talk to you freely about the case. Sometimes we're not always able to get to the jail, and especially if we have a client. You know, I have clients that are in Austin or in Dallas or whatever, and so I can't just get up and go to the jail and see them. And so your client should feel that they can talk to you freely about the case and about the facts and strategies and those type of things without worrying that that might be used against them because someone else gets a hold of it.
And Julio, I mean, one of the big things you're talking about, what's the problem with the breach is more than anything, isn't it a strategy issue, guys? I mean, they can't use this information in court, so if you're talking about something with your client, obviously they can't use it. But the fact that it's possible that the prosecutor may get a hold of what your trial strategy is.
Sure.
Your work product, so to speak. That's the troubling aspect of this.
Well, let me ask you all this. Does the fact that there's a third party who arguably lawyers should have known that their calls are being recorded, okay?
And they do know that.
And we do know that. So the idea that, well, I guess we should have trusted Securus, but the lawyers who provide or talk with their clients, now those conversations are recorded, what does that mean? Does that break a privilege? And so is now the conversations between the attorney and the client, has that privilege been violated by a third party who we arguably maybe should have known and therefore may be able to use those things in court in some way?
Well, but a waiver has to be knowingly, right?
Well, and I think they make it explicit that, well, they say they're not recorded for attorney-client.
Right.
I mean, that's part of the deal. They say we don't record attorney-client calls, and if there is an inadvertent one, they promise to erase it. But
I mean,
14,000 is not inadvertent.
I mean, some of the stats, guys, that they had, they market themselves as a secure call platform. And in 2012, they were processing alone 1 million calls a day. Okay, so that number's got to be a lot more by now. And they service, by any estimates, 1.2 million inmates. So, like you said, Scott, I mean, this is not inadvertent, in my opinion.
No, and I think that well, first of all, I mean, if your name is Securus, don't let yourself get hacked. I mean, it doesn't seem like a good business practice.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
Kind of secure.
yeah, generally secure.
Almost securest.
But, and this was one of the concern when the video conferencing was floated here a couple of years ago, and at the time, HCCLA listserv, everybody said on our listserv, don't do it.
Yeah.
Don't trust it. And we're inherently an untrustworthy lot. I mean,
for good reason.
Well, let me rephrase that. We aren't untrustworthy. We don't trust anybody else, and in the criminal justice system in general. And that's the way it should be for reasons like this. And this, to me, I mean, I doubt that. Well, clearly, some Houston lawyers would have been recorded saying something that they probably regret saying.
But they probably thought they had the freedom to say that.
Because they tell you we do, and they make that promise to the community, to the jail, to the lawyers, to the inmates.
And Securus came into Houston, sold the county a bag of goods, looked everyone in the eye, and lied.
Well, that's a political issue too. It's a privatization of things that should inherently be done by the government, but which we're willing to outsource, like jails and detention centers, and we give people the ability to make profits on those things. And
But the county's making a nice profit too off of this, because we talked about a couple weeks ago on the show about the FCC and how they put a limit, a cap on the rate that they could charge. And of course, Securus comes out and says, by doing this, you're going to, really harm the inmates. Really? I mean, come on.
But wasn't there they were kind of, they called it actually a kickback, wasn't
right.
the article?
It's called a site commission.
Right.
Okay, that's what it's called. And basically, they pay a commission to the jail, or in this case, the county, that grants them the access to come in and do this. And that was part of what the FCC said was, do away with these site commissions. They didn't come out and outright ban them, but they said, look, if you guys want to gripe about how this is going to dent your revenues, do away with the site commissions. The FCC strongly urged the counties to do away with that.
Well, sure, but the counties don't want to do away with that because they want the money.
Exactly.
And that's probably part of the built-in cost up front for Securus, when they're like, well, say they want the contract to be $500 million, but we're willing to go, or 750, but we can go a different number, whatever that number might be, to make up that cost from what we give to the county back. I mean, they're going to find a way to make money on the deal, no matter what.
And here in Harris County, they're doing the phone calls for the Harris County Jail. I guess they did a pilot program with the video, as I understand.
They did, and some of those still may exist. I haven't seen any in the jail. We
talked about it today. From what our understanding is, if there are some, nobody can find them or get it to work properly.
But they're full on 100% in Fort Bend County. They're doing both the phone calls and the video conferencing. I mean, they've got a specialized room set up for all the video conferencing in Fort Bend. I don't think if you go to see a relative, if you're not a lawyer, you can't get a contact, I guess as close to a contact visit as you can get. You have to do it all through video in Fort Bend County now.
Yeah, in Fort Bend they're required, or if family or friends. An attorney can still go to the attorney booth. Right. But family and friends have to use the video system.
And this is something that we can tie into a later topic about whether a defendant's presence in the courtroom, but even in Montgomery County now, they are taking pleas from defendants through video. And so you got your lawyer in the courtroom, you got the defendant at some holdover cell with the video camera, and you got a judge on the bench. And somehow that's supposed to be a knowingly and intelligently acceptance and plea of guilty. But what happens when you're taking a plea on a screen? And so how are we supposed to humanize the defendant? How are we supposed to?
They don't want us to.
They don't.
And that leads to a bigger issue with this, and that is, you talked about it before we went on the air, Scott, and that is the convenience factor, the
Sure.
so-called convenience factor of this, of not having to go down to the jail and talk to your clients, or the convenience for the county of not having to perhaps staff the jail with as many people. But at what point, in a situation like this, do we have privacy rights that outweigh convenience? Ethical duties as an attorney that outweigh convenience? Just pure humanity for people being able to have contact with a loved one in jail that outweigh the convenience of this ridiculous system? At what point does that take over?
Well, almost immediately, really, and it's something that nobody ever really. Anytime there's a convenience issue, like taking pleas up on video, it's never for the convenience of the defendant.
Right.
Period. It's only to expedite things, and it's a big deal when you're standing in front of the judge and you're taking a plea if you're a defendant. And a lot of times they'll say, all of a sudden, I've had them say, and you have too. Everybody has, where I don't want to do this right now. I decide I want to have a trial, or they're telling me all this, and that's why judges need to look at them and tell them. And doing it over the videos, it's ridiculous. It's more ridiculous than getting magistrated on video.
That's right.
Which happens now. It's happening right now at the jail.
And without a defense.
Because sometimes your clients, when you're standing up there, even if you've gone over everything, you've discussed it and the pros and the cons and whatever, sometimes when they get up, they're scared. And then when they get up there, they suddenly have a question, right? Or something, or they want to talk to you about something real quick. Well, how do you do that over video, right? Like, well, hold on, let's go to a private video conference.
Well, and if in the event that you're sitting there and your client's on video and your client says, hey, I need to ask you something, what do you say? Do you say, hold on, Judge, can you turn that way while I have this video conversation exchange?
To the video.
I'm gonna whisper in the microphone. I don't.
We turn that off.
Yeah, how does that work?
There's going to be we're 4 defense lawyers sitting at this table right here. So, of course, we have a vested interest to this. We clearly have one view of this, and it's a united front on this. But there's going to be a large segment of people who say, I don't really give a crap.
Especially family visits.
Yeah. I'm not doing anything wrong. My family members aren't doing anything wrong. What the hell do I care? If it saves the county some money, what's the response to that? Why should everybody care about this, guys?
Well, I think when you start chipping away at rights, that's when people need to care, because this may not seem to affect a larger group of people, but ultimately it could, right? It's like the slow chipping away of privacy rights and ethical duties and obligations and due process.
And there is no right to privacy in the jail. They know that, but this has been done for time immemorial, and it's not really about saving money, or it's a lazy way for people to get incriminating evidence over the phone. That's all it is. It's just a lazy way for the cops and the DAs to get evidence over the phone, because clients say dumb things all the time to their family. I had a case recently where a client of mine, if he had never called anybody and said anything, he would have gotten a massively
different deal
than he got. And it's not, he didn't admit to any other crimes. He didn't sell out anybody else because he was charged with something that he did by himself. But the nature of his calls were so upsetting to so many people that he got just hammered. And it's extremely unfortunate. And no matter how many times you tell your clients, don't talk to anybody when they call, don't call the person with whom you're not supposed to have contact with, they do it. And that's not It's not the DA's fault, and it's not the sheriff's fault. It's the client's fault, but you're there and you're isolated. You don't have contact with your family, the outside world, and at some point you just want to talk to somebody.
I even think on the Securus website it says we're another tool to use in the fight against crime. Like, and so it's already set up to be somewhere to catch low-hanging fruit to use against an individual.
Sure.
But Scott, I think earlier you said something about this is what happens when we privatize it rather than the government do it. But I think that we've had the same problem when the government's done it, right? Like in terms of the sheriff's office recording people's calls. I mean, I think we've all had that experience where maybe you've had a client in jail for like a year or a year and a half, and you're about to go to trial, and like 2 weeks before trial, here you go. Here's all your clients' calls from the past year and a half, and
Well, yeah, and it's not like the government hasn't been massively recording every phone conversation we've all had. It's,
true.
Edward Snowden is in another country for a reason. You know, I mean, yeah.
We need to get Obama on this.
Well,
Lame duck. So.
It's definitely a problem. I mean, it's gonna continue to creep up. We've got a bunch of these companies now doing this. So, if you want to read more about this, our HCCLA's president, Joanne Music, she wrote a blog entry on our website, www.hcclatv.com. You can read Joanne's thoughts and leave us a comment there, and we'll respond to it. Okay, I want to move to the next big story of the week, and that is the biker indictments finally coming out in Waco. 106 of the 177 originally charged, they were indicted this week. And, it took 9 hours to indict 106 people. By everyone's calculation, that's a little less than 5 minutes an indictment.
I wonder if they did it on video.
Well, that's actually probably slow, maybe compared to a lot of times.
Sure.
I mean, because in Harris County, a lot of times they'll do hundreds of indictments in 3 or 4 hours. So.
But I think I read
they took their time.
Yeah.
Well, I think what's amazing is I think that which is the true nature of the grand jury process. I think that I read that it wasn't that they only indicted 106 out of the 177. Most of those 70 odd leftovers still haven't been presented. I think they presented 106 and they got 106. So,
shocking 100% batting average.
It's crazy.
Never happens.
Out of all these people that were there.
And correct me if I'm wrong, it was a pick-a-pile grand jury that indicted most of them, or did that not happen? If I'm not mistaken, the judge handpicked a guy to go preside over the grand jury who was also a police officer.
It's that one guy, yeah.
Yeah.
I think the new law kind of would take some of that out of it.
Well, the other interesting fact of this, guys, was that the grand jury met in a room inside the district attorney's office. There's a new annex that was built that houses the district attorney's office, and they weren't meeting in the old grand jury room in the courthouse. They met in the frickin' DA's office.
Well, I think it kind of goes to the fact that the grand jury less and less has become a separate, independent entity. I mean, that's what a grand jury was supposed to be way back when it started.
Yes.
It's supposed to be, citizens of the community, judging a person, and basically they served as a protection kind of between the government and the accused. And I don't think that that's the case anymore.
Yeah, they've become a rubber stamp.
Yeah.
That's all they've become.
Well, the grand jury is separated by a floor at the DA's office, and there may be DA's offices on that floor. I can't remember. If it's in the same place, I believe so.
I wonder if any of those that were indicted had counsel, and those counsels were able to prepare anything to present to the grand jury.
How would they have time to present a packet, though?
No, I think actually a lot of them, from my understanding, I mean, there are a lot of attorneys that have gotten on board with those cases. So
Yeah, there are. I think the majority of people, as I understand it, either have been able to retain counsel or have been appointed counsel. But I'm not sure how you would even, present something if you are that lawyer when they're basically picking them up and putting them down.
Has anyone seen the indictments? I didn't get it. I didn't see them, so I wondered.
I have not, but here's the interesting thing. What I understand from reading the news articles is every single one of them is an indictment for engaging in organized criminal activity.
Sure.
Of which the underlying charge is murder. Well, and here's my question, guys, because there's been so much coming out about who fired the shots and whose bullets are where. A murder charge, when there's some suggestion out there that it's actually the police bullets that are in these bikers, how do they even sustain that, guys?
It's a cluster.
It
That's all I can. That's all I can say about it. I mean, it seems like a cluster.
It's just ramming it through. I mean,
Yeah,
you're talking about, I think there were 9 dead or 10. Was there?
9.
I think it was 9.
But whatever the number is, the grand jury is in effect saying, well, it doesn't really matter who shot who then. As long as you guys shot, as long as one of you group of 177 shot one person, that's all cool.
But it's really
Because
taken away that.
it doesn't matter how many the cops shot or didn't shoot at that point. Because if they can say we can pin one on all of you 177, which is a farce.
I mean, because it really takes away the mens rea, right? The intentionally and knowingly portion of it. If it's just like all of you must be involved in some way or another.
Well, engaging has always been that catch-all to kind of snare everybody and see what shakes out.
The system would crumble if each of them are going to fight the case. I hope each of them do.
Well,
And
certainly.
I hope they bring Waco to its knees.
Certainly in McClinton.
I hope.
Julio's all about just
I know. He's on fire
taking
tonight.
the system
He's
down.
on fire.
A couple weeks ago, you were on that rant about, let's just set everything and wreck the system.
Well, we were talking the same thing. If you said every marijuana case in Harris County for trial, the system fails, and we win. So.
And I'm so sick of the marijuana charges. I can't even.
Well, we'll get to
we
that
can
a little later. But
set them all.
yeah, set them all. Well, I think that's probably what's going to happen, though, in Waco. I mean, there's some pretty aggressive lawyers on this thing, thank God, who have made their feelings known and seem to be fighting real hard on behalf of their clients. And so I think you're going to see the majority of these cases probably end up before a jury of 12.
Or get dumped.
Yeah.
I mean, it's fortunate. Geographically, it's strange, right? I mean, you've got Austin, Dallas, Houston. And I'm sure there's some fine lawyers in Waco too, obviously. There has to be.
But I think there's a lot of lawyers from Houston. There's a lot of lawyers from Austin
In Dallas.
and Dallas that have kind of converged in.
You pull some resources and it gives everybody a little more leverage in a strange way. Because you've got so many different defense attorneys that are probably willing to work with other people.
But do you think, guys, that the new grand jury system is going to in any way help this kind of rubber stamping, if you will? I mean, or are we just basically putting a Band-Aid on a gaping wound?
I don't know. I mean, it's been so new. I mean, the law was, when did it, in September, I guess, is when they kick in, September 1st. I think that they're probably, sadly, if I had to make a guess, and when you look at other jurisdictions that did not have it, I bet you that the rate of indictment is probably fairly close. You know?
But have you had the chicken wings at Twin Peaks? So good. I kid.
On that
I
note,
kid.
on that segue, we move to the next
it's a
topic.
good segue.
Thank you, Julio, for the next segue. Last Friday, Travis County District Judge Julie Kosurik was shot in her driveway, coming home from a high school football game. I myself have appeared in front of Judge Kosurik a couple times. I don't know her very well, but I found her to be one of the more fair and reasonable judges that I've ever appeared in front of. She was a longtime prosecutor, was appointed to the state district bench by then Governor Bush in 1999. And like I said, guys, I've always found her to be a very fair and thinking judge who considered the evidence and considered a lot of stuff when assessing punishment for your client. That being said, what happened last week is not just a crime because it happened to her, but it's a crime that happened, period, end of story, to any judge. And I think, as a lot of people said, this is really an assault on the system more than anything.
It's fairly shocking.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't happen often, fortunately. And
I'm surprised by that.
Well, from what
It doesn't happen more often.
Well, why?
Well, because I think that, especially with the war on drugs and the cartels and everything, I'm frankly shocked that this kind of stuff doesn't happen or hasn't happened more often.
I couldn't agree with you more. And as much as we attack the system and judges, I couldn't do that job because every day they're out and they are sentencing people, they are making comments that maybe they're judges, and
Right.
they interact with some tough people, and I'm surprised it doesn't happen more often. I'm glad it doesn't, but there's sometimes if I was a judge, I'd be scared. You know, I'd say, whoa, you know, maybe I shouldn't go to this part of town at night, or maybe I shouldn't go over there, because it's a huge responsibility.
But don't you think also, I mean, I'm glad, obviously, it doesn't happen more, and it's
Sure,
a very sad
we
thing
all are.
that this happened. But it's kind of like the security we have at the courthouse, right? We have all this security, and we have to, you know, lawyers and take off all your stuff and every day or whatever. But the reality is, how often do people, I mean, if you think about the number of people who walk into courthouses every day across America, from like JP court all the way up to the federal courts, right? Millions of people every day. And people aren't trying to commit crimes inside the courthouses. I think that weirdly there is kind of this unwritten code that, you know,
Maybe.
because, you know, you can go into courthouses in small counties and there's no security, right? Or they'll walk by and just kind of wand you and keep going, and nothing happens. So in a way, I'm not surprised that it doesn't happen. It's just like a lot of times people think that our client, like, you know, they're like, aren't you scared? No. You know, I mean, our clients may not like us, but most of the time they don't want to hurt us.
No, I mean, I think that's true. I think that there is a difference between a client who is upset with the advice you give them and them wanting to exact harm on you or a prosecutor or a judge. I do tend to agree with you, and I'm by no means am I suggesting that, you know, I mean, I'm glad it doesn't happen.
Right.
Believe me. I mean, you know, obviously a lot of us are friends with judges. They were lawyers before they were judges, and so a lot of us know them as colleagues within the bar, and to see anybody get harmed, regardless of whether they're a judge, whether they're a prosecutor, whether they're a lawyer, it makes you kind of take a step back and think about the system.
Did you do y'all know? I mean, y'all know how it actually happened, right? I mean, I think a trash can was placed in front of the driveway, so as an attempt to make the vehicle stop.
Mm-hmm.
So this whole thing was planned and orchestrated. It's a hit.
It was a
It was a hit.
And they picked up a person of interest here in Houston who was charged in another crime, another murder case here in Houston.
Sam has that case.
Sam Adamo has that case and asked for a speedy trial today, and got
Sam
about
gets,
10 months.
Yeah, Sam can get what he wants most times. I mean, he can. I mean, it's 10 months, but it's better than I could get.
Which is fast for a murder case in Harris County.
Sure.
Really fast.
Depending
for a
on what
murder
court
case.
you're in. There are some
Yeah.
courts, you know, you go a little faster than others.
True.
And
Alaska's going to be a 10-day and you go.
I think the judge is fine now, right? I mean, she's
Yeah.
as good as well as she
Right.
can.
She's recovering.
Right.
It's
But then you also wonder, and I know nothing about the person. I mean, I've read about him, but and I think that he had a previous murder case that was dismissed. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm not
Maybe
sure
like
about
2 or
that.
3 years
He
ago.
did, yeah.
And so you wonder if there's a mental health issue, which has become a big problem, you know, or is a big problem in our criminal justice system. And
no. Will he be? What's the charge? So she's a judge. Is there any special kind of
He
thing
hadn't
to it?
He hadn't been charged yet. It's just he's just a person of interest.
But what would one charge be on a hit on a judge? I mean, is that a capital murder? Is it a murder? Is it what? Is it a federal case? Is it a state case? Is it a public official?
well, it'd probably be capital, right? Because it's like the police
They're in their-
officer. And-
Well, but I'm not sure, but she was acting in her official capacity at that time.
but when you're a judge, you're a judge
Exactly.
Yeah, well,
24 hours,
sure.
right?
Like a cop can be, too. I
But
mean,
even after you retire, you're still a judge. Or even if you're, you know, you lose an election, you're still judge, right?
And, you know, he may just be a person of interest because, you know, because I guarantee the cops first started looking at who's on her docket, right? I mean, that's obviously probably one of the first things that a cop would do. And once detectives start looking at that list, it's like, well, here's a guy who's had a murder before, so that's obviously going to whittle that down some. And then he's about to get charged in Harris County, or if he wasn't already, and you know, obviously they want to talk to him.
Yeah, because I think he was set on the docket for that Monday, right after. I mean, I think this occurred on a Friday night, right?
It
I
did.
think he was set on the docket to appear before her on the following Monday.
And it wasn't
So-
like, oh, sorry.
No. So I mean, you know, person of interest is one thing, but
Yeah.
to be charged, I mean,
I don't know.
who knows?
And it wasn't like this judge was all judges are created equal under the eyes of the law or God, whatever. But it wasn't that she was like a chief administrative judge of all the judges. Like she was a big kind of deal over there, which makes the whole case just.
It's just it's really sad, and I hope that she fully recovers, and you know
It
that
is.
we don't have more incidences like
Yeah,
this.
we all wish her a speedy recovery and hope she gets better soon and returns to the bench and that nothing like this happens again. We're going to head over to our 60-second law lesson right now. We've reached the 8:30 hour, and this week we have Mark Thiessen, who was on our show a couple weeks ago. He's going to give a 60-second law lesson this week about why we need an independent crime lab here in Harris County. Mark, take it away.
Hi, I want to talk to you about the need for a true independent crime lab in Houston, Texas. Not a crime lab owned and operated by DPS or a particular police agency, but a real independent lab like Johnson & Johnson or Bayer. Someone that we can trust, that when they make mistakes, because real labs make mistakes, but when they make mistakes and it's brought to their attention, that they'll actually tell you, hey, I made a mistake. You shouldn't rely on this, we'll fix it. As opposed to what we got going on now where they say, oh, it won't affect the result. People's lives and freedoms are on the line. You've got years in prison on the line for some DWI cases. And I think that's a lot more important than medical science. Forensic science is the top. It is the tier. It must be proven beyond a reasonable doubt. And I think the only way we can do that is with a true independent forensic crime lab. Not like what they're doing at HPD, where they say they're independent, yet they put their sticker on the HPD crime lab. You can put lipstick on a pig, but it's still a pig. I'm Mark Thiessen. This is your 60-second law lesson.
Thanks, Mark. That was a great 60-second law lesson. We really appreciate you coming down here and giving us your views on the need for an independent crime lab here in Harris County. And guys, we couldn't agree more with that. Like Mark said.
I can't believe that may be the shortest amount of time I've ever heard Mark talk on a topic. 60 seconds. I'm amazed that he could do it. But, he's absolutely right, of course.
You can go see catch Mark's 60-second law lesson tomorrow. We'll have it up on our website, HCCLATV.com, along with all our other 60-second law lessons that we've done throughout the course of the last, I don't know, what have we started this? The last few months, right, Julio?
It's been pretty successful, a couple months. We have a lot more to go to.
We do. All right, I want to turn, because last week we talked about, Julio, the First Chance program and it becoming mandatory January 1. We have a little bit of new information coming out, and our producer found some very interesting information. Apparently, the district attorney herself, Devin Anderson, this week said that her office is going to stop accepting possession of marijuana charges under 2 ounces starting on January 1. And she put in an email to police that they are now directed to basically put anybody who qualifies within that program. Questions that I have about this, guys, and I think it's interesting first that she's going to decline to accept charges, period. But what about probable cause and reasonable suspicion? If these people are getting into a program and the officer is making a full, discretion of whether or not they're qualified for this program, he's basically also deciding reasonable suspicion and probable cause without any challenge and oversight.
It's true. It'd be hard to contest that, at some point.
And I'm going to call it out right now. If I'm not mistaken, on the campaign last time, it was a big issue about whether or not you should not accept certain types of charges. Regarding that was PCS, less than a gram, and that was a big deal.
Crack pipe case.
Yeah.
Trace cases, yes.
You remember this?
I clearly remember this, that it was a big issue with the police, with Lyco saying that she wasn't going to accept charges. And so they said, oh, she's not following the law, and she's not allowing officers to follow the law. And, well,
And now,
when you're up for election, things change.
Well, I'm not going to I'm not going to fault them if they become less stringent on weed cases. I mean,
Well, I'm
we
glad.
can agree.
I'm
that
with
it's,
you.
You know,
Yeah.
people say things all the time they regret. I've got volumes of things that I say that I regret. at
We're
home.
waiting for some here, man.
Oh, that, you know, I've made some promises to some people.
It's like a George H.W. Bush no new taxes kind of promise. I want to remind our viewers we have opened up our phone lines. 713-807-1794 is the number. Call in with your questions or comments for us right here. You know, you say that, Scott, about the promises and the campaign promises and everything else. But a couple interesting stories coming out this week about Mexico, and their Supreme Court has basically blessed and you know, approved people growing and distributing personal use amounts of marijuana. And this is on the heels of Canada about to legalize marijuana. So we're going to be in a sandwich here of two countries, two major countries who we're big-time trade partners with, legalizing marijuana.
We're going to just have to buy a whole bunch more guns.
Well, but I mean, isn't it about like 60%? Isn't that what they say now of people who in America who want, you know, personal use amount of marijuana? I mean, I could be off of my statistics, but I think it's somewhere around 50 to 60% want it to be legalized. I think it should be legalized. We're putting way too many people in jail behind, you know, a personal use amounts of marijuana.
And it is interesting, that thing in Mexico, because I believe it's been decriminalized for use for small amounts already,
I
right?
believe so too.
But, and it's also, one thing that when I looked at that issue today is the ruling was like narrowly applied to a particular growing club, which is a pretty awesome club, though, really. If you're going to be like, you know, dart league. I mean, what do y'all do? What do y'all do at work? We grow weed. I mean, it's pretty great to get that specific exemption from the highest court in the land, but
They had a really good lawyer.
yeah, they did. Well, they had a cartel's lawyer. Somebody.
No, I'm not.
Exactly. But your point, I think, and yours too, is that we're sandwiched in. We're going to be sandwiched in there, and 60%. You said. I mean, I was a little surprised that it failed in Ohio the week before last, or during the off-term elections.
Because that's historically the last few voting cycles. That's been a not quite a Republican stronghold the last few voting cycles.
Well, and I think that it looked like that people were just kind of concerned that basically they were giving a few people a monopoly on the business in basic perpetuity. So I think that people could smell a rat on that one.
Or smell the marijuana.
Smell it, yeah.
Can you explain that? That's interesting.
From what I recall reading about it is that there were almost maybe even names of these people in the bill, if not the corporations that would be granted basically a license to sell weed. And in Colorado, you have to have a license to sell and distribute too, but it's much more broad. And so I think that maybe people just smell the rat, or maybe it was a more conservative turnout. I mean, there's really no telling. I mean, I think that it'll come on a state-by-state basis, obviously, and I don't think the feds will do it anytime soon. They haven't shown any real interest in doing so.
Go ahead. I was going to say I agree with you that I think it's going to be a state-by-state.
There was a real clever lawyer, I believe in Colorado, who's involved in growing, he's a lawyer also, but he's also grow up. And the feds tried to prosecute him, and then there's some line item thing in the bill where the federal government can't use federal money to come prosecute you if the state has ratified what you're doing. And he won.
Right.
Yeah. So, I mean, the feds can come after these states who have legalized it, but I think it's here to stay. I think it's here.
Well, also I think like with Colorado, they put out the numbers about how much revenue like it's made for the state of Colorado, and it's just, it's been
It's amazing how much that changed minds.
right.
If the largest county in Texas, if the DA in the largest county in Texas has said, I'm not going to prosecute basically personal use marijuana charges, doesn't that, and look, she's she's Republican. She's about as Republican as you get.
True.
Okay. At what point does that get the ball rolling in Austin to decriminalize personal use amounts?
I think that's huge. I mean, I'm interested to see how effective the program is. Okay, so she's going to decline the charge, but what about when that officer has already put someone in cuffs? Because that call to the district attorney doesn't happen while he's already established PC or reasonable suspicion. That call to the DA on intake happens when the guy's cuffed and in the back.
Right.
And there's already some sort of record and track of an individual who's already in custody.
And is it for first-time people? Are the cops able to run somebody's history, or?
That's the way I understand it. I mean, I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
I don't know what
of
they
the
have access to in
particulars.
the field. I mean, I know they
Yeah.
have access to some criminal record, but I think that, it all depends on the cop too. How much does this weigh? Oh, it weighs a lot.
Well, and
this is a big bag of weed, and then when it comes in, evidence, when you go look at it in the property room, it's tiny.
It bothers me too if it's just first offenders, right? I mean, that bothers me, that.
Well, that's really the only way to do it, though, in a conservative county.
I'm getting a comment from one of our viewers on our Ohio discussion, and they said that the issue was that there were only 10 dispensaries who were applying for the license. So in essence, they would have had a monopoly. And apparently, one of the seekers was good old Nick Lachey. What was I don't remember the name of his band because
Backstreet Boys?
98 Degrees.
Is that what it was?
Look who knows the boy band.
I bet it's
I apologize. I defer to you.
No, I didn't know.
Boy band expert.
Exactly.
Can we delete that?
No.
No, we're going to highlight that.
That's
one
going to be
on
your
the
new
list.
tag,
If
Jay Vela.
If I called your phone right now, it's a ringtone.
Do not call my phone.
You know it is.
One of the other interesting things, that we, aside from learning about Julio's boy band proclivities, one of the interesting things we learned about the DA's new policies is she wants to expand this to theft charges. And I'm not sure how you really implement that. I'm not sure how what the mechanism is for doing it. Does anybody have any idea how that's even going to be possible on a theft charge?
Well, one of the things, let's back up actually a little bit, is that the legislature said, I guess, 3, 4, 5 years ago, that officers had discretion to just give citations for marijuana, misdemeanor possession of marijuana, shoplifting, the low-level Class B misdemeanors, that they could just give them a citation, and so they could come to court, the same as of traffic tickets. So the person would still be charged with a Class B or whatever. So, but there's already been that discretion to not take them to jail.
And I think some counties are doing that, I think, in Texas.
Yeah, but in Harris County, they wouldn't do it. It was kind of this big circular argument, So now,
the merchants were fairly against it, right?
meaning,
I think that I think there was a big push from stores, lobbyists basically, from some of the larger stores in town, Walmart's, I guess, and Target's, Home Depot's, that want people taken off and arrested.
well, I used to work with a coalition, and basically the DA's office said they'd be on board if HPD was on board. And HPD said, we'll be on board if the sheriff's office is on board. Sheriff's office said, we'll be on board if the DA's office. So it's this big circular. So this kind of goes back to that, which they're already allowed to do citations rather than take people to jail. But I guess if someone's, for the shoplifting, they say, okay, do the shoplifting class. And
That's awesome. So it's like, so I'll take this jacket and this belt and these shoes, and it's cool. Like, is that how, and what happens if you do it?
It's only cool till you go to court.
Right. Well, no, if it's extended to if the first chance program is extended to thefts. And so then what happens when, you complete the first chance program? Are they keeping a record of people who have completed first chance programs? So in the event that it happens again, this individual's not eligible?
Well, I think y'all discussed that a couple of weeks ago about expunction issues and things like that, and that's a similar kind of deal.
And I think she did say, I think Devin Anderson did say, if I'm not mistaken, that they would be keeping like a database of who's been in the program and who successfully completed it or not.
It just seems to me that doing this on a theft charge seems to be problematic because we've all kind of dealt with it to some degree. There seems to always be a shifting policy within the DA's office on how certain defendants are treated on theft charges, whether you are between the ages of 18 and 21, or whether or not you're an employee of and you steal something from the employer you work for. If you're a part of an hourly worker at Academy or something and you steal some shoes or something. There's all these different categories of which a defendant is treated, so I'm just not really sure. And also, they won't offer pretrial diversion or even deferred in a lot of cases to people who live out of state, who come here and shoplift. So I don't know how this is going to really work out with all those different policies. It seems like you were talking about we got to get this law enforcement on board and this law enforcement on board. Seems like you're going to have to come up with one consolidated policy within the office period.
And to me, I don't think it has to be that complicated, right? I mean, you can just say if it's a first-time shoplifter, whether you're an employee or not, right? Bring them in and allow them to do pretrial diversion. I think a lot of this is creating red tape when there doesn't need to be. That if you get arrested, allow the person to, do pretrial diversion or those type of things. I think
nobody wants to give up power completely.
Well, I understand. I'm just saying,
Yeah, I hear you.
in the perfect world,
Well, and the retailers want a threat.
Sure, they don't want just people even perceiving that they could have a free pass at something.
No.
I mean, they normally get the stuff back, but a lot of times they don't, or they'll look at Walmart sues them too.
Right.
all of them do, yeah.
Good luck with that.
Pay your $325 service fee.
Yeah.
They're stealing from you. Why do you think they're going to be able to pay you back? Kind of thing.
I will say it's good to hear something from the top down, that they're trying to do some sort of sweeping uniform as much as they can be policy.
I agree.
It's good to hear that. It's refreshing.
I agree.
It is a breath of fresh air. In an otherwise cloudy criminal justice world.
That was good. That was good.
He's been working on that all day. All day.
I've been working on it for about 30 seconds. Jen, since we have you on the program, I want to talk about this anti-gang injunction litigation that you've been working on, because not a lot of people know about it. And you've been working on this, I guess, this week. In fact, you've had some litigation going on, and I want to commend you because you and 6 other lawyers, Monique Sparks, Jamel Haynes, Drew Willie, Brennan Dunn, Mecca Lewis, and Shanna Hennigan, all were representing about 50 defendants pro bono in this litigation.
So,
and that means free for people.
very, very free. So on September 2nd, 2015, the Harris County District Attorney's Office and the Harris County Attorney's Office filed a lawsuit against 93 defendants that they allege are members of the Bloods and the Crips. And as part of their lawsuit, they are seeking to temporarily enjoin, meaning prohibit, and then permanently enjoin these individuals from entering an area they have dubbed the South Lawn Safety Zone. And it is 2.08 square miles, so a square mile radius. And it's basically Old Spanish Trail down to Cullen, down to 288, down to 610, back to Old Spanish Trail. I think I did that wrong. Cullen to 610 to 288.
We're not testing your geography here on the show.
Okay, please don't.
Right next to UH, right?
Right. So it's the, and actually if you know where the probation department is at 3330 Old Spanish Trail and all that, right? So it's that whole area. So 2.2 square miles is actually a very large area. And the way that we got involved with this is that Monique Sparks, one of her clients, was served in court with this petition. And when we actually sat down and read this petition, it says, you can't drive down the street, you can't use a cell phone, you can't wear a belt, you can't wear shoes, you can't wear sports, clothing, you can't curse, In addition to things like you can't commit crimes, which we're not supposed to do anyway. And so
it's like that Captain Obvious commercial for Priceline, right?
Right. So it's so a lot of it is
fashion. You can't,
right.
You can't wear your baggy sports clothes.
Well, no, it didn't say baggy. It just said sports clothes.
The baggy certainly implied with the people they want to apply this to,
well,
though.
But my thought was, you can't wear a belt. Well, then you would be wearing it, So we were very bothered by a lot of the constitutional implications of this, right? And the fact that many of these people, they grew up there, they lived there, whatever. And so we kind of just all got involved with this and, started, told these clients, we'll represent you pro bono, because what happens, they serve them a lawsuit. They serve them a show cause order that says you have to come to court and show cause why this injunction should not be granted against you. So shifting the burden to them as well. The police officers show up and they get on the stand and they basically enter in the offense report, in its entirety.
And stopping you there for a moment, you talk about a show cause order. For these people, that it shifts the burden to them. But for you guys, these people would show up unrepresented by a lawyer and not have the first clue about how to present evidence to try and rebut this evidence.
And even beyond that, so many of them do show up,
right?
Or not many, several do show up. But beyond that, there is about 25 of these 93 individuals that are actually incarcerated, either in the Harris County Jail and or in prisons around the state. So they were given a show cause order, but the judge did not issue any bench warrants to bring them in.
But yes.
So, wow.
Yeah.
And she entered orders against them?
Well, she did show cause orders against them, yes, but she didn't issue bench warrants, which apparently happens every time they do one of these injunctions. And what we didn't realize, everyone's heard of Haverstock, which was the first injunction, and that was
for our viewers at home. What was Haverstock?
So Haverstock is an apartment complex in, I guess it's around A-Leaf. I'm not exactly sure, but it's an apartment complex that the state did the same thing. They filed a lawsuit against individuals and sought an injunction to keep them from the Haverstock apartments. And so an injunction was entered against them. And so anytime any of those individuals, if they showed up at the apartments, and they were arrested for trespassing and violating a court order and those type of things.
And the big problem with that is like, if you're a black male between the ages of 15 and probably 40,
Yes.
if I had to make a bet.
Yes.
And the cops are going to want to know if you've got one of those injunctions or not. So there's no way that the cops can be able to I recognize him, I recognize him. They're going to find out if you have one of those or not, which means you're most likely going to be illegally detained. I mean, there could be a valid reason why you get pulled over, signaling or...
But once you slap that injunction, if you violate that injunction, you're done.
But basically everybody else in the neighborhood is caught up in that too. Like somebody who's not a subject to the injunction, if you're rolling in a particular type of car and you have a look about you that the officers want to investigate, they're not going to worry about whether they have PC, and they're going to find out if you're supposed to be there or not.
And that's exactly what's happened. And it's every injunction they've done has been against black males, and they're always alleging that they're Bloods and Crips. But then when you, like in this case, they said, oh, they're all Bloods and Crips. But then when we began investigating, we found out, the majority are not Bloods and Crips. But they just lumped them all together. And if they've gotten arrested and they've gotten arrested with any of the other individuals, they said, oh, that's evidence of gang activity. When in reality, a lot of these individuals, they grew up in this area. They have families that live there. Many of them are married and they have children that live there. This is their home.
Are they constantly adding names to this list and having new show cause hearings for new people on a list or that can't be there? How does that working?
So basically what happens is when they sent out the show cause orders, it was to appear in court in the 164th District Court on November 2nd at 9 a.m. And every time they do an injunction, which they do about one per year, they have that one hearing. And so everyone who has been served, the state moves forward on. Generally, they're not represented. And that's also an issue because the people who do show up, they should be appointed counsel because their liberty interests are at stake. They don't understand. They just have this show cause order and this big petition that says, temporary injunction, whatever. But they should be appointed counsel.
What are the penalties for violating this injunction, or are there?
Yes. So first, of course, there's the criminal trespassing charge, right? Because whatever area you're supposed to be enjoined from. So if you violate it, then there's criminal trespassing, but it's enhanced because it's related to a civil injunction. On top of that, there's also a contempt order for violating a civil order. which is an additional up to 30 days in jail and/or a minimum $1,000 fine to a $10,000 fine. On top of that, once you've violated an injunction, the county can then file a lawsuit against you for damages for violating the injunction. So it's a huge issue.
Where the hell are these people supposed to go?
Well, that's one of the issues. What a lot of people don't realize is that in 2014, for instance, we mentioned Haverstock earlier, which was an apartment complex, and in the original injunction, it was Haverstock and like a school near it. In 2014, they expanded the area because they said, oh, well, there's spillover now into the, like let's say here was the line. Well, now there's crime over here, so we need to expand that area. I mean, it's
indefinite.
It's a problem.
It keeps growing and growing and growing.
Yes.
I mean, well, Jen, we're getting close to the end of the show here, but I want to thank you for your efforts on that. I mean, it was real important when I found out about this through an email from our producer that you had forwarded to her. I thought it was a very worthwhile topic to bring up because not many people know that this stuff is going on within our own community. And so, I applaud you and Monique and Jamel and Drew and everybody else who worked on this because, without lawyers stepping up and taking on these kind of cases pro bono, you just never know whose rights are going to be violated. And I applaud you guys for doing this. I really do.
We appreciate it. It's been a lot of hard work, but it's worth it because like you said, you never know who's going to be next.
Sure. And clearly everybody they want.
Right.
I mean, I know we're wrapping up, but going back to what you said, I mean, so it's just you're coming in the car. They think that you're affiliated with this, and here's our reasonable suspicion. Here's our probable cause. Go ahead and stop you, even if you had nothing to do with it.
And that's exactly what's happening.
It's crazy. Crazy. Great show this week, guys.
Yeah. Thank you for having us.
I appreciate y'all coming on, Jen, Scott, Julio. It was a good time.
Good time.
You guys
good
need to come
time.
back.
We will.
Maybe for some good conversation.
Just try to get rid of me.
We don't want to get rid of you. We want to bring you back. That's all the time we got for tonight, ladies and gentlemen. But I want to encourage you to go to our website, hcclatv.com. We got a blog up there. We post a lot of topics that we'll be discussing right here on the show. You can leave us a comment. You can also follow us on Facebook and like us on Twitter. And we'll take our comments and questions. We didn't have any calls tonight, so we'd like a few more phone calls. Get in the act, get your friends to watch us, and give us a call right here on the air. And we'll take your calls, questions, and comments. For Jen Gaut, Scott Pope.
Thank you.
Julio Vela.
Go Horns.
And do you think they're going to win this week?
Yes.
No.
Yes. Hey.
Is the other team not going to show up?
Oh, okay.
God, I'm hoping.
Close the show.
That's all the time we got for tonight, ladies and gentlemen. We'll see you next week right here, 8 p.m. Thanks a bunch and good night.
Thank you.